Yes, ma'am.
I was very much opposed to the pre-K-4 program. I think a lot of our problems, and this is my personal opinion, that our public school system is responsible for much of the chaos that we see in our country today. And to take very young children away from their parents, I know that they're not taken away, but they're given to the system to be indoctrinated by ultra-liberal teachers who have been teaching them for the last 20, 30, 40 years that America is a bad place to be and that we're not exceptional and all of the things that you hear about. I think it's just criminal almost to put little children like that into a public system that's going to indoctrinate them into anti-Americanism. And I know the governor had good intentions, but I think this is going to be nothing but a daycare system.
Senator Birdwell, please state the reason why you voted for this bill.
Because it provided parameters and standards for pre-K that weren't prior attached to the dollars that went out to the respective school districts that applied for it. Yes, sir.
Senator, I am probably as much of an anti-tax person as you'll find, but I'm also very much in favor of transportation and opposed to tolling. What is the, and I know it's all a question of money. Eisenhower put in the interstate system, it was a freeway, and that is what fueled our country in the 50s and 60s, the growth of it. What is the chances of getting, because we haven't changed the 20 cent per gallon for, what,
91.
Yeah.
Since the early 90s.
And inflation's eating it up and all that, so what's the chance of maybe going to a 5 cent increase on the gasoline tax? And I'm saying that as
You
a
want me
really
to confess to a tax increase? Jeez.
I'm as anti-tax as you'll find, but I want the roads more than I'm worried about the nickel.
Senator Birdwell, if you can't look at your constituents and say, I'm anti-tax and I'm raising gas tax because we haven't done these things since 1991 and the price of everything's gone up, if you can't sell a gas tax increase, then shame on you.
I disagree. Here's why. Because all too often, the tax increase is the easy way out instead of getting the tight shot group you're talking about.
Yeah.
TxDOT will have no means or no imperative to be better with the dollars they have if we simply say, go with the tax increase. That 5 cents that's going to education, I mean, that's part of the battle. If we can get that 5 cents out of education, back into transportation, but I got to backfill that somewhere else because of education, again, is our biggest chunk of the state budget. So I'm not a, let's just go to the tax increase first, because you can make the argument that it's been, what, 25 years
1991.
since, and a lot of it might be, inflation. A lot of it is better gas mileage and fewer gallons sold. That's a a lot of the hybrids and electric cars, things of that nature. So you're getting the same amount of use on the roads without the same amount of revenue associated with the gas mileage. But I don't want to take the easy way out. You're asking hard questions. Do I have the answer to every hard question? No, I don't. You've already, told me you're disappointed in me. I'm disappointed you're disappointed in me.
Well, I'm disappointed.
But I'm,
that I'm disappointed.
Well, but, we were in London last session. We're now on Normandy beaches, and I still got to get through those other things to get to Berlin. So we're working on it. But it is a massive challenge.
How long have you been in the Senate?
5 years.
And you just got to London?
I would ask you, being from Travis County, when you give me a Republican district judge and a Republican, I'm not trying to pick on. What I'm saying is that you're fighting your look. I want to just tell you what We are fighting and dying for yards at times, okay? This past election cycle, we got some great things done. We changed the 2/3 rule. We got a number of things done that never would have had a freaking hearing on the floor of the Senate. I don't want you to sit here and say, I'm happy with you, we're done, we can all go home, there's no problems to deal with. But you gotta what wins the game, the 80-yard Hail Mary in the last 20 seconds of the game might be sexy, but that's not how you win it. You win it with first downs throughout the entire game. And your state legislature got you first downs. Yes, sir.
UT Regent nominees.
I am happy to discuss it.
At the beginning of the session, Governor Abbott named some very controversial people to the UT board. Obviously, you were the chairman of nominations. I sat through, I was at that hearing. I watched you, Senator Taylor, and Senator Burton. Fairly good. At the end of the day, they ended up passing the committee with only Connie Burton voting against, and it passed the floor with only Connie Burton and Bob Hall voting against, and then Schwartner joined on David Beck. Did the nominees satisfy you? Do you think they are qualified to sit on the board, and what do you think of their performance so far?
They wouldn't have been my choices.
But you voted for them.
Yeah. I don't get to select them, I don't get to nominate them, but we went through the various reports. Senator Taylor in particularly performed outstandingly in going through and looking at, quote, where there's smoke and see if there's fire. And in digging through all that, there was not sufficient evidence to say unqualified. I think they've only met twice. I've not looked at the specific decisions they've rendered since being on the UT Regent board. There were 3 of them. The one that actually had the greatest amount of vocal non-support, the lady whose name is escaping me now.
Tucker.
Yes, Secretary Tucker. She was the one that had the most immediate reaction to her nomination, negative, as opposed to the other 2, Mr. Hicks and, again, I'm having a Beck and Hicks, yes, that's it. She came in, knocked it out of the park. Even some of the people that had been opposed in their cards that they dropped, said, that they were more comfortable with her. We vetted those candidates to the best of our ability. The governor makes the nominations, and it's certainly easier to oppose a governor's nomination if it's a governor from a different party. Does that mean we don't give them the evaluation that we think we need to? No, not at all, we do. When you see the federal model of the various nominees that go through the various committees of oversight, it's always easy to oppose the president from the opposite party. When we sat down and go through those nominees, whether it's transportation, whether it was the Board of Pardons and Parole, whether it was the Office of Violent Sexual Offender, I brought in 4 different judges the first time. I don't mean to sound like I do need to defend myself here. I don't think you're being accusatory. You're asking what the thought process is and what we've gone through. I brought in 4 different judges, a district court judge, an appellate court judge, a regional presiding administrative judge. I've only had 9 in the whole state that deal with the recusals and a number of things that I know Judge could spend hours here explaining to you. And then one of the Judicial Conduct Commission judges that's a district judge, but I brought her in her capacity as the Judicial Conduct Commission judge, member of that Judicial Conduct Commission. We haven't brought in a district judge before nominations in 8 years. I wasn't going to tell the judiciary you get a pass just because you're in the judicial branch. Those battles, though, are incremental, echelon by echelon. I don't know if I'll sit on nominations again. The supreme branch of government is the legislative. If you go look at Madison's Federalist 48, it talks about how the legislative branch must necessarily predominate. And that was one of the reasons why they split into two houses, to split that power. Nebraska, of course, is the only state that doesn't do that. But we looked in depth at the various nominees, not just as a person, but as a function. It's why we brought in transportation. It's why we brought in the Secretary of State. It's why we brought in the Inspector General for Health and Human Services, because we had a number of contractual issues that were grossly mismanaged. Those were, they weren't emergency appointees, but the governor made them very quickly and asked us to render a decision very quickly because of the need of getting those folks into their respective duties. So we look at a number of things in nominations. The federal model is Senate Judicial Committee looks at judges, Senate Armed Services Committee looks at Secretary of Defense, DOD appointments, Education looks at education. Each of the respective committees of oversight does the nomination. In the state legislature, a unified committee looks at all of those, not the committee of oversight. And I go through the binders, I go through the material on them, and make sure that we're getting good folks. I think overwhelmingly Governor Abbott has made very good decisions. So where we've been able to be a good combat multiplier on many of those, although those were very contentious, because, I mean, we were looking, you know, this is something that I had a concern here, and let's take a very hard look, and Senator Taylor and myself did that, so did Senator Schwartner. He's not even on the committee, and he joined us in doing so. But I could not at the end of the day say, they are disqualified. Would they have been my choices? No. But they were not disqualified. Yes, ma'am.
Where are we on human trafficking? Was anything on human trafficking?
Yes, ma'am. What's the, is
Well,
there,
I know we had a rally for it at one point. Was anything?
well, we're trying to stop it, not rallying for it, but I know what you mean.
Well, rallying.
Yeah, one of the, because there, believe it or not, there are some people that get brought to the United States against their will. So a lot of human trafficking is people that are trying to get here illegally. Those laws we can enforce because it's not an immigration violation, it's a trafficking of drugs, weapons, or forced labor. You see the signs at the convenience stores that talk about it's unlawful for forced labor to be solicited. So we have the ability to enforce those laws because those are state laws. Smuggling, we actually did some tightening up of some of the smuggling language in HB 11 for border-related items. We are trying to stop that because of the sex trade. A lot of the folks that get across the border going straight to Houston, they're going to the larger communities. So we are trying to put a big dent in it. We've had for the last 3 interims a joint select committee on human trafficking to make tougher penalties, particularly those that have been of a sexual violation, to increase the penalties from 3rd-degree felony to 1st-degree felony, other things that give us greater combat power to punish those that we convict and apprehend and convict and potentially deter, and then additional personnel on the border to help be an interdiction to those types of things. We want to make it tougher for the drug cartels to choose to do business in the state of Texas and have them go elsewhere. So I think we're getting there. Yes, sir.
The EPA threw us a curveball in closing down all our coal plants, and I know you guys had to address that. Can you tell us what you did?
The EPA has not yet closed them, but they are developing a rule that, based upon the president's greenhouse gas emission standards, would close a number of the coal-fired plants in the state of Texas. That happens, particularly in the in the summer months. You will go to turn on your air conditioning and it will not turn on. The co-ops, I visited with the co-ops before session to look at, particularly in Senate District 22, but it's a statewide problem. If you take, again, because of the growth of the state, it's not just impacts on roads, it's not just impacts on water, it's impacts on energy use, and water and energy are parallel. We only have one natural lake in Texas, that's Caddo. The rest of them are man-made to be able to provide the hydro source, to provide the hydropower, whether it's nuclear, gas, coal, whatever the heating mechanism is. So we are very concerned. TCEQ is very good at helping fight back against the EPA. There's been everything from non-attainment. Waco, McLennan County is just a couple of points away from being in non-attainment. EPA's been very good at fighting, I'm sorry, not EPA, but TCEQ has been very good at fighting that. There's been other counties that, like Hood and others, that they've tried to bring into non-attainment when the measurements do not support that. And in many respects, it's the EPA, if I may be so bold in my language here, just, we're gonna show you we're dominant just because we can. There's not scientific data to support it, we're just gonna be dominant for the purpose of being dominant. But we are watching that very, very closely. If the rule gets adopted, it would mean in around 2019, things would shut down. So it's not an immediate shutdown, but there's a lengthy battle ahead of us that, short of a significant change in the presidency, or the ability of a number of supermajorities in the Congress that could override current or a future non-Republican president, that will have to happen, because the rolling blackouts that we'll have to start controlling because of the power generation that has been taken offline. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
You've talked about border security and using the National Guard, and you've also talked about this human trafficking and this kind of problem. This group saw, is it Dusty Fleming or Rusty Fleming, who has a DVD out, which is really compelling, called Drug Wars, Plata o Plomo. You either go along with the drug cartel, you meet with ISIS, by the way, that's documented, or you take the bullet,
Yes.
the plomo. The problem is everywhere, and this DVD shows conclusively that even border security agents are co-opted to work with the cartels. Because
It has happened. We had the sheriff of, I say it's Hidalgo County.
Yes, yes.
I think it's Hidalgo, not Webb. I think it was
It's Hidalgo, yeah.
about a year ago,
Yes.
was indicted and convicted for corruption because he was working with providing information on law enforcement activities to drug cartel folks. And that type of counterintelligence operation is vital to our success, where you can not only stop the bad guys, but interdict and stop your own that would be corrupted, that are performing subterfuge against you.
So the question is, I'm sure that everybody in authority is aware of this problem and can be working with those in authority on the border to
Yes, ma'am.
reinforce them or something like that.
There is a number of mutual aid agreements between DPS and Border Patrol. We do not investigate Border Patrol. That is a federal function for them determining. We can be an information source, but that's this is the cue for me to shut up, right?
I
Okay.
just want to say that's going to be the last question.
Oh, okay, okay.
And I know you have to leave.
I do, I don't know what time it is, but, five after, okay. The challenge that we face with our border is that our neighbor on the south side, there are many aspects of the Mexican states that are dysfunctional, maybe too strong of a word, but it's on the trend of being a failing state. And so a lot of the violence you see on the other side, whether it's looking at Breitbart's reports or other, how exactingly accurate are they, but when you're seeing that kind of violence because the mafia-esque rule of not elected officials in those northern states, but the drug cartel territory is profound. And it's one of the reasons you have so many people, it's no excuse for violating the law and crossing our borders, but one of the reasons you see so many people trying to get here is many of them are trying to escape what's going on in Mexico.
Shirley,
Yeah.
short question
Yes.
or the last
House
question?
Bill 98 by Representative Dan Flynn never made it to the House floor for a vote. My question is, when can the state of Texas invoke the 10th Amendment against the EPA and all of these unconstitutional things that are coming into Texas?
This is not gonna be a short answer. It was a short question, but it gets back to proper role and function. When you say implement the 10th Amendment, as a state legislator, there are things that I wish the federal government wouldn't do to us, but as a state legislator, I do not have the authority to vacate federal law. My ability to enforce the 10th Amendment is from the perspective of not doing things that are the federal government's function. I maintain a fidelity to that oath that I took. It is your federal representatives that need to maintain the 10th Amendment at the federal level of not telling the states how to suck the egg in things that they shouldn't be telling the states how to do. So if you're talking about we're going to invoke the 10th Amendment and say we're not going to obey the law, we will then be just as lawless as either a president that writes an executive order that says vacate the law, or we will fail to do our duty the way collectively the Congress has failed to do that by not living up to the standard of their oath associated with you will not do anything outside the bounds of your constitutional oath. So whether it's, and education is always the greatest example of, you won't find the word anywhere in the Constitution. Looking to a state official to invoke the 10th Amendment to tell the federal government to stop, we can go to court the way Governor Abbott did because it's based in the law that Congress passed. But the greatest amount of combat power to invoke the 10th Amendment and leave the states alone is who you send to Washington to live up to their fidelity of their oath as federal elected officials. If I don't want to get into I can talk about Convention of the States, but given the time factor, that's the one last area of combat power that state legislators have, with the 17th Amendment vacating us choosing our senators and the general public now choosing them. The key dynamic that changed with the 17th Amendment was this. Let me use Senator Cruz as the example. Great guy. I don't know. I endorsed him for president back on Thursday. So that might be some of you happy, some of you mad. But let's take Senator Cruz, knowing this wouldn't happen. But if Senator Cruz was chosen by the state legislature without the 17th Amendment in place, the legislature now chooses, we go back to the legislature's choosing. What's the different dynamic between the state legislature choosing the senator and the general public choosing the senator? And that is this. I can tell you where the federal government micromanages us, tells us to do this or to get this, you got to do that, and it's taken us 100 years to get into this mess that we're in since the passage of both the 16th and 17th Amendments. I won't bore you with all that history. But if Senator Cruz had voted for Obamacare, came back to Texas and said, see, I cared about health care of the citizens of Texas, the state legislature's response is, we didn't send you to Washington to care about the health care of the people of Texas. We sent you to Washington to care about the freedom of maneuver and the sovereignty of the state of Texas. When the 17th Amendment changed that to the people, it was a complete fallacy to believe that you as the electorate would walk up and say, I'm going to vote for this guy to go to the House of Representatives because he's going to bring home all the bacon. Check. I'm now going to vote for this guy to be my United States Senator who's going to say hell no to all the bacon I just voted for in my House of Representatives guy. So what we did with the 17th Amendment was turn the United States Senate, instead of being the state's place where we enforced federalism by who we chose, it became just a smaller group of people that are exactly like the House of Representatives. That is the structural, organizational change that the 17th Amendment made. Were there challenges with legislatures that chose people because who had the most influence, or absolutely. Was there corruption in various states back in the 1900s and 1800s? Absolutely. But you change the motivational dynamic of why senators go to Washington. I want senators that go to Washington to protect me from the federal government, not be a seconding motion of what the House of Representatives might say we want in the immediate crisis, or we want, the federal government to do. That's where you get back to that proper role and function of government. As an Army guy, I did not give an infantry mission to the logistics guys. I didn't give a support mission, a logistics mission to the field artillery guys. You give the federal legislature its federal missions, and otherwise the state legislatures handle the things that aren't specified in Article 1, Section 8, or the necessary and proper clause. Let me give you a quick example of necessary and proper. It's the best example. And I know I'm filibustering here, I'm sorry. A lot of people look at Veterans Affairs and realize that, yep, Veterans Affairs is a federal function. Is it specified in the Constitution? No. But where it says in Article 1, Section 8, the Congress shall maintain a Navy and raise armies, is the Air Force specified? No. Founders didn't know that we would have aircraft. But it's the Congress's function to provide a Navy, maintain a Navy, and raise armies. The necessary and proper clause, which is the Section 9 of Article 1, I believe, after it's in the latter part of just before you go, the last section of Article 1, Section 8, it's the last paragraph before you get to Article 1, Section 9, where it talks about the necessary and proper. Based upon how our military forces have evolved from the Revolutionary War to where we are today, I, as a veteran, am taken care of as a federal function. Now, the state does things for vets. We do that. There's a number of things we do for veterans from Texas. But that is a federal function because my health care isn't free. I've had people say, well, you're getting your health care from the federal government, why can't I? And I said, because raising an army and maintaining a navy is a federal function. Health care is not listed in there. And if you expect somebody to raise their hand and say, I'll support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, meaning you might get your legs blown off, your arms blown off, or people have a nasty habit of getting dead in wars, what's my motivation? I bartered. I made an economic exchange, potentially with my life, my health, and on a certain day in our nation's history, my wife and son becoming a widow and orphan. I bartered that based upon the pay, benefits, and things that the Congress said, in exchange for your service to help us perform the national defense function of maintaining a navy and raising armies, we'll pay you this compensation, which includes health care. And as a retiree, I have TRICARE. I don't take the state's health care. I don't want to brag. I'm not.
Yeah, but
I didn't sign up for the state's health care.
But you still have to pay for that TRICARE, and you shouldn't have to pay that for. Granted, $450 a year is a fabulous price for it, but you shouldn't have to pay a nickel for it because they promised it to you.
Well, I appreciate the sentiment. I won't. What I'm trying to say is, we need people in elective office that discern not just government should do. Because the first question I ask of anything that comes to me is this a proper role and function of government? And if so, the second question is, what level of government should do it? There are things I have voted against in the state legislature, not because they were bad ideas, but because it wasn't really the proper place for the state to determine it. It was better for either the school districts or the county commissioners court or city councils to make that decision, instead of having the state legislature perform as this uber state board of education, which we have one that sets curriculum, so that if somebody from a certain county says, the state ought to do this, I'm like, well, wait a minute, is that really best for the state to decide that? One of the things that's very difficult, I know I'm vomiting on here and I don't mean, one of the things that's very difficult about governing the state of Texas is with 254 counties of such widely varying demographics. A county the size of Brewster, with only 4,000 people in it, county of the geographically the size of Harris, but with millions of people in it, or Somerville County or Rockwall, or all those dynamics, we have to set state policy that creates a big enough box for all of those counties to fit inside with their respective tax bases and resources. That's why the education dollar is so difficult to divest out of transportation. Those are some of the big challenges that we face. Please don't think I'm standing up here making excuses. We are fighting a lot of great battles and had a lot of great success. Are we done? No. But I'm looking for people, and I want to be one of these people, of fidelity